Good evening, Mr. Munjal. Just a minute. I'll just give you the co-host rights. Just a minute, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Munjal. This is Amitabh Datta, the president of the Calcutta Management Association. How are you, sir? Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And we really look forward to your talk today.
Thank you. So is this a routine, regular monthly meeting, or is there?
These are special meetings which we are doing during the this period.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The meetings are separate, which is the executive committee meeting, etc., etc.
Right.
So in fact, we have three types of programs. One is in conversation way, where we have important people from the society across various walks of life, and we, for example, you have a cricketer like an Arun Lal talking to a cricket historian like Bodhi Mazumdar, talking to each other.
Right.
We had somebody like Amitabh Chaudhary, who's a very well-known author, talking to Rita Bhimani, who's a PR specialist, and that is one set.
Right.
And we have some programs which are basically on knowledge, where we sort of talk about, for example, we are having something on data management and data, etc. So those are the series, and this is the premier one, which is the leadership series, which is where we've had before you, we've had Mr. Singhania, Harsh Pati, then we had Mr. I forget names. So we've had a lot of senior people before this.
And I'm just looking at the screen. It's saying you want me to talk about family business, new era, fresh opportunities.
Yeah.
So what is it? Is it an interactive session? Is it a speech? How do you want to do this?
No, you speak for some time.
Okay. How long do you want me to speak for?
20-25 minutes, maybe half an hour. And then we have my colleague, who is the vice president, Mr. Shenoy. Shenoy is the head of the new business division of Tata's.
Okay.
So he's the vice president. So he will take over. In fact, I just say one or two words in the initial stages formally. Sure. And he takes over, introduces you, and then you speak, introduces the topic, then you speak. And then he takes the questions and he sort of moderates them and gives them to you. So he actually runs the session today.
Okay.
So this program is obviously live on, we are on Zoom, plus it's live on Facebook. It's also live on, then we'll get into YouTube.
Right. Okay.
So people across different platforms work for this program.
Right.
So Mr. Shenoy, Mr. Munjal.
Yep.
Shenoy, are you there?
Yes.
Hello and hello and welcome, Mr. Munjal, and good evening to you.
Good evening.
It's a real great pleasure to have you with us today. And as we keep saying that, what is the best way to make use of a crisis or a pandemic? And I think there's no better than having to learn from the best. And I think if it is not for the pandemic, we look at the better side, perhaps we won't have Mr. Munjal with us today. But thank you very much for being here, being with the Calcutta Management Association at this time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And as I was hearing the conversation, Mr. Munjal, we did have people like Mr. Gopal Krishnan, Mr. Neotia, all address us during the earlier sessions. And this is a leadership session which is going to address what we do during these turbulent times.
Right.
For all the participants who are on the show, a quick introduction to Mr. Munjal. Well, again, there's a big cliche that Mr. Munjal needs no introduction, but it is my pleasure to describe Mr. Munjal for you. Mr. Munjal is one of the founder promoters of the Hero Group, India's premier automotive manufacturing group that has evolved from being the world's largest bicycle maker. I remember having grown my childhood riding a Hero cycle to the largest two-wheeler maker as well. And I remember many of my colleagues got their first salary and first bikes from the salary, and it was the Hero bike. He's the chairman of Hero Enterprise with interest in insurance distribution, steel making, real estate, and corporate training. He has made strategic investments in several areas, ranging from e-commerce to hospitality. He also supports startups on digital learning, community transportation, healthcare, women empowerment, and education. And of course, he's also the former president of AIMA. Mr. Munjal also chairs a board that runs a Doon School and sits on the board of IIM Ahmedabad, ISB, and SRCC. He has co-founded the BML Munjal University and is president of the Danan Medical College and Hospital in Ludhiana. He has also served as president of the CII and the AIMA, as I said earlier, being a member of the Prime Minister's Council on Trade and Industry, and was on the government task force that prepared the ground for India's banking and insurance reforms. Mr. Munjal has set up the Serendipity Arts Foundation, which aims to receive patronage in arts. He is also the president of Ludhiana Sanskritik Samajam, which supports performing arts across India, across the North India. Well, Mr. Munjal, we are very delighted to have you with us today. And what better way than anybody who's been there, done that, led from the front, transforming an entrepreneurship-based business to one of the largest corporate in the world. And aptly, the topic today is a family business, new era and fresh opportunities. What we attempt to do, Mr. Munjal, is over the next 30 minutes, if you could address the session on what you feel is on the aspects of the topic, the family business, what it means from the new era and the fresh opportunities perspective. We will take questions after that and we'll engage in the interaction. I hope it's okay with you, Mr. Munjal, and
Sure.
I hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And first, my compliments to Calcutta Management Association for setting up a series of different topics being discussed by leaders from different walks of life, as I heard a little bit earlier. And I think that's a wonderful way to educate ourselves during a difficult time that we're going through. It's interesting that this time, on the one hand, many of us, or I'm going to say most of us, are locked in at one place or the other. But our schedules seem to have become very busy because we are available, because everyone assumes you're at home, that you're actually available. So people are making all kinds of requests and demands for meetings and conversations on any time, literally, including weekends, Saturdays, and Sundays. So in some ways, the productivity has actually gone up. But it is also a fact that when the pandemic came and hit us, our first response, which by the way was a very good response, of locking down the country. And you do know that we had the tightest lockdown in the world. That allowed us to do 2 or 3 good things and also had consequently 2 or 3 massively negative effects of that. The good thing was that it allowed us to push back the climb up of infections, large numbers of infections. And that period allowed us to prepare much better in terms of medical resources, hospitals, ICUs, beds, and equipment of respirators and ventilators, and also things like protective gear, etc. On the negative side was it brought economic activity to a complete and a grinding halt, because all it took was turning the switch off. But now we are finding that turning it back on is not as simple and as easy as it was to turn it off. Because especially in areas which are connected activities, so if you take a manufacturing business, for example, any kind of manufacturing business, you take textiles, automotives, leather goods, electronics, all of them have a significant supply chain that works with them, of suppliers of tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 suppliers. And other than getting enough people in your plants to manufacture, you also need a full distribution chain all the way up to the customers. So whatever are the number of steps in your chain, all of them need to be active, need to be available, need to be outside of the red zones or the lockout zones. And you need to be able to provide to the consumer and the customers the product and the service of the customer of the product, which is the post-sale service. So it's only when everything comes on stream that this system then actually starts working. Until then, in many parts of the economy, we are still sputtering. Again, the good side now is that almost all of the activities, the economic activities which are directly connected to the rural areas, have actually taken off pretty well. So if you look at sales of tractors, two-wheelers, bicycles, fertilizers, sugars, a whole host of agri inputs, and consumer goods in the rural areas. So companies like Dabur or Levers are finding that that part of their market is kicking back in quite a robust manner. And different companies have seen growth go back to 60% to 120% of where they were before the lockdown for COVID-19 took place. Now, your subject is specific to family businesses. So I will cover a slightly broader topic first, and then I'll come back to family businesses. It is also well established that anytime there is a crisis, anytime there is a problem, which is not a normal, small, minor problem, that each of these crises brings also a host of opportunities alongside it. So on the one hand, we've seen financial services firms, banks, and many other manufacturing firms or retail institutions take a beating. But you can also see that it has created a whole host of new opportunities available for us. On the one hand, there were some activities which continued to function and prosper in this time, especially those working on digital platforms, communications, software services, and the like, because our lives kept running. So on the one hand, I think we should say a big thank you to all of those who put themselves in harm's way. Doctors, police, those doing retail jobs, doing delivery jobs, so courier services, those manufacturing for all of these goods that were being distributed, many of the retail stores, many pharmacies. So there were actually many new heroes that we developed and we saw in this period. So for a long time, we've talked of India's sense of belonging, the patriotism of those who fight on our borders. I think this is a new form of patriotism that we've began to recognize, which is why country after country, the leaders are telling us, including our own Prime Minister, that you should stand up and clap one day, you should light a lamp or a candle one day to acknowledge the work being done by the frontline workers, not just in healthcare, but in all services that were kept going, despite knowing that there is a risk to doing this. So I think that's one thing we have to acknowledge, has demonstrated an amazing spirit of service, of societal responsibility. On the other hand, for those who are investors, there is a real opportunity, because many assets are now available because of the distress at the ownership level, at the shareholders level. Many good quality assets have come into the market, either for sale or partial sale, or are available to acquire at a low price. Now, somebody asked me, when you keep saying this, what's happened to the stock market? Nothing in the stock market seems to be at a low price. And it is a fact that the performance of the stock market in India today has almost nothing to do with the performance of the companies that the stocks represent. And the reason for that, of course, is only liquidity. We've had a massive dose of liquidity come into the stock market, both from within the country and also overseas. Please remember that worldwide right now, the cost of money has gone down to being so low that there are countries which have issued negative value bonds. So, and also there are many countries in which the bank rate has become negative. So places like Japan, Germany, Switzerland, and a whole host of others, if you give money to a bank, you don't get paid by them. You have to pay them to keep your money. So it is a strange environment. And in that time, India offers one of the markets which has clear growth potential. So there are more and more people who have put money into the Indian stock markets. We are hoping it would not just be stock markets, which is why many in the Indian leadership, including the Prime Minister himself, And many of our ministers, the economic ministers, the finance minister, the commerce minister, industry minister, are now making pitches. The Invest India has now designed a specific customized pitch for 1,400 companies to go to them and tell them specifically why we believe there is an opportunity for them to come in and set up their operation in India. We all know that the trade dispute between China and US over the last couple of years created an interesting opportunity for many countries to go and pitch to those companies to bring their investments to their countries. In India too, we spoke about it, but unfortunately we were never able to get much success. The countries which got success were places like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and as far away as Brazil on the other hand. India got some benefit, but very, very small. Now this time, because China has kind of become almost like a villain of the peace, and many global think tanks, leaders of countries are now actively pointing a finger at China and talking about how disruptive they have been to the world order, how they're disrupting the status quo of geopolitics, and how some of the technology companies are either directly or indirectly owned/controlled by the leadership, the government, or the armed forces. And therefore, when they go into another country and they have access to sensitive information and data, the risk of this going back to China and being used, misused, or abused, many believe is high. So which is why they're pushing back. This time, India is genuinely making a big pitch for this opportunity. And I hope we will be able to do two things: that existing Indian companies will be able to supply goods and services to global buyers of goods and services, which were depending on China and other supplies in which China was a significant part. And also, many of those who are looking to invest outside, including in China, many companies have now developed what they call a 1+1 strategy, which means they will deal with China, but they will also deal with one other country. And we should position ourselves front and center of this opportunity. Now, coming to your main theme of what is likely to happen in this new era, where the opportunities are, and what does it mean for family businesses? In some extent, I already talked of the opportunities. One of the things happening to all existing businesses, they are all focused on one, cash preservation, two, figuring out a way to become more efficient as we come out of this storm of the COVID-19. How do we continue a more efficient operation? Because we also have to be globally competitive. For too long in India, we've got away by saying our wages are low. That is not good enough. Our productivity has to be high for the wage component in the finished product and service to be low. And that is something on which we have not scored well at all so far. The second is companies looking at a completely new cost model. So they're doing a zero-based activity and a zero-based costing. Since we have leadership from Tata's and some of the others here on the call, I'm sure they would acknowledge that all significant companies worldwide are actively engaged in doing this. The third, in some sense, which has become the most important, is looking at induction of technology and new methods of working, more automation, more robotics, more machine learning, more artificial intelligence, and just a general embracing technology much more than we have been doing earlier. Now, this is in many ways the biggest game changer right now. Now, family businesses have some disadvantages, but they also have many advantages. One big advantage they have is they can take decisions which are generational. They can do things for a business where the return will not necessarily show tomorrow, but they can wait for a few years for the return to come back. And that is a big, big advantage family businesses have, because some of these investments are big investments that I'm talking about. And family businesses also have the nimbleness to be able to take those decisions. The challenge today is in small and mid-sized businesses, which is the majority of family-owned businesses. Now they have to figure out of the three things that I said earlier, how even the most traditional businesses, the more conservative businesses, how do they bring technology into their system? And I've had this conversation now with many, many different companies, with many, many different businesses. And the first question many of them have is, how can I bring technology? Mine is this old style conservative business. But when you dig down a few layers of how the business operates, invariably, and I'm telling you almost without exception, all of them agree and accept that not only can they, but they realize that they must do it. And I have to gladly report, I know of at least 20 companies, these are small companies, who are now saying, at least on the front end of my selling and marketing engine, I'm gathering much more data, which my system is analyzing. Or across my system of the full value chain, I put in a new communication system that the market information not only comes to me, but also goes to my suppliers. So there are different variants of how technology can help us. Many companies are saying, in my factory, any job that is a health hazard or is highly repetitive or requires a high degree of consistency, people are now being replaced by machines. These are actually obvious reasons. You can see why it works. And in India, in a country like ours, where we have a very large number of people working, very large number of people who are available to work, we have to figure out a nice balance. How do we create a balance between people and machines? Because please remember, even when you bring more machines in, the need for people is not going to go away. People are not going to replace all jobs. Machines are not going to replace all jobs, because once machines come in, they allow you to become more productive, more efficient, more profitable, and you redeploy those to grow your businesses more. And that's where the magic sauce is. You create more economic activity, and the multiplier of that is wonderful. It creates many, many more jobs. We already do know that India is making an active effort over the last 15 years or so to actively grow the manufacturing base in India. Traditionally, we used to be a manufacturing country, and that's where the big focus of family-owned small businesses used to be. But over the last 20 years or so, the big growth in India has actually come from our services. So the realization that manufacturing has got left behind, needs to grow back up, is very acute. Governments, regulators, so all kinds of those who support economic activity are talking about this. But it's also well recognized that for every one manufacturing job we create 3 to 5 manufacturing related services job. Whether it's a courier service or it's a transportation service, there's a whole host of activities which get kicked off the moment manufacturing grows. So for us as a nation state, it is essential that without compromising on our quality and growth in the services sector, we bring the other two sectors up, the manufacturing and the rural economy. At this time, as we know, about 68% of India lives in the rural areas, and about 54% depends directly on agriculture as the primary source of income. So it is essential now, and we do know agriculture is contributing less and less to the economy, thereby causing more poverty in the system. So it's important for us, especially at this time when a lot of the migrant labor has moved back to the rural areas, that we take full advantage of this, which is automate in the urban industrial centers and take advantage of less labor being available. And in the rural areas, industrialize quickly on things like dairy produce, food processing, logistics, cold chains. There's a whole host of areas, and many economic opportunities are available on artisanal skills. India has been the home of arts and crafts for centuries, including making usable goods, not just for decorative purpose, but for utilities. There is an amazing opportunity right now because many of the workers who have gone back to the rural areas and have moved back home may never come back. Some of them will come back. The broad belief nowadays, it will be kind of one third in 3 buckets. 1/3 have begun to come back or are already back or are on their way back. Another 1/3 are likely to come back by end of this year or early next year. And about 1/3 of them will actually not come back. So using that amazing strength, because please remember, when they worked in companies and factories, many of them have actually gained many, many skills. We keep saying unskilled and migratory labor, but after having worked 2 years, 5 years, 10 or 20 years, all of them had gained some skill. So it would be wonderful to use that skill, put it to good use. Use things like Manrega to up their skill further or re-skill them for the areas that are now required in the rural areas to rebuild a new rural economy and create much more efficiency in the urban economy, thereby giving India a big step forward. It is also essential right now that the support that the government provides the next time around, and we hope there will be more support coming from the government, some of it may be targeted at small industry, at the middle class. So you also kick in some consumption right now. And that, as we all know, creates a virtuous cycle. Consumption creates more production of goods and services, and those create more jobs, and people get more jobs and more salaries, and thereby they become consumers. And that's a virtuous cycle we look for. And that's the place where in the middle of this, family-owned businesses have a unique and a wonderful role to play. And I do hope that this opportunity which has been presented to us, which is unique, but we also have to look at what the new opportunities are, what the new areas are. Healthcare is an area, for example, which is going to grow in many, many different ways. Pharmaceuticals are going to grow in many different ways. Tech-based businesses will grow amazingly. Logistics as a business is going to see growth. So there is a whole host of new opportunities that are presented to us. And not all of them are going to be the domain of the very large organized professional companies. In fact, majority of them will actually come into smaller, mid-sized and family-owned businesses. So family-owned businesses have a unique opportunity right now to focus on new skills, new style of working. We have to accept that skilling is going to be critical and important. Learning the trade and learning the way to work with technology is going to be critical, and encourage young people in their own families to adopt and adapt some of these newer technologies, because the opportunities, as I said, are actually pretty endless. Because there will be some of our businesses which will die, and some will die without knowing why they're dying. They will never recover. But there are many, many of those which are now seeing a unique opportunity in a slowdown. If you're an investor, you can find assets at a reasonable price. If you're wanting to expand an opportunity, today everything is available. Architects are available, contractors are available, machine suppliers are available because they do not have enough work. So you can create an asset, create a new factory, a new facility, a new plant at a significantly lower investment that you would otherwise need. We do, however, have to remember anything that we do from now on has to be done with a sense of responsibility. We have to watch for the ecological impact. We must, as I said often, tread lightly on this planet. Maintain an ecological consciousness as we do things. Be more energy efficient. Be more eco-friendly. And it's entirely possible. And I can tell you, the advantage of doing these things is long-term. When we were building our factory for two-wheelers at Haridwar, when I was then involved in Hero MotoCorp, or Hero Honda as it was then called, and we built the world's largest green roof. Now, many people kept asking, why are you doing this? But the lifelong benefit of that is that that factory always have a 5 to 7 degree lower temperature in summers and higher in winters than the ambient outside. Just imagine the comfort level of the people inside and the permanent long-term saving in energy cost of running that plant. Then we built another plant in Neemrana. So what we did in that plant was, that's actually known as the greenest automotive plant in the world. What we did in that plant was that we generated more than a megawatt of power from the roof of the building. So we inverted the truss structure. The trusses were outside of the building and became the support and stand for the solar panels. And the triangle that you have below the trusses, we filled up and used for planting through hydroponics all the food that is cooked every day in the canteen and the cafeteria of that factory, because many people work there. All of it is grown on the roof of the building, with the impact that we are recycling almost everything. So we recycle water in all our plants that we've set up, by the way. For many, many years, we have been focused on ecology and communities. The other thing I think which is important for all businesses to focus on, especially family-owned businesses, that we are the fortunate few those who get to be able to put up this kind of facilities, get good families, get good education, get access to good opportunities, we have to reach out to those less fortunate. So working with communities, supporting those less fortunate than us, whether you do it for education or healthcare or clean drinking water, there are many, many ways to do it. Our own arts or culture, as I was talking about, artisanal skills, for example, there is an amazing opportunity to rekindle the strength that India has in the crafts and artisanal skills and create new businesses out of them. On the one hand, it can provide over 150 million jobs in India. By the way, there's actual research. Actual number is 200 million, but over 100 million jobs can be created if we can convert our artisanal skills and crafts into active, viable commercial businesses. On the other hand, it will bring India a strength which almost no other country has. Because in many other economic activities, we are chasing others behind because they've been doing it 5, 10, 20, or 30 years before us. Here, we will be the leaders. We will have others trying to catch up to us. So there are some absolutely wonderful, unique opportunities available right now to us. Indian cuisine, for example, we have such an amazing variety. We need to figure out a way to do this at an industrial level and scale. Again, an opportunity for family-owned businesses because these need an absolute active touch and feel all the time. Those businesses which are people businesses especially have an affinity for family-owned businesses to step up and play a more active role, especially where the leaders in the family, the patriarchs and the matriarchs are people-oriented and relationship-oriented, as most businesses are expected to be. It is expected that family-owned businesses will transfer their personal philosophy into the business philosophy, which will also include the societal responsibility that each one of us has. So it's now 7:29 and I was asked to speak for half an hour. So I shall stop here now and only say that it is a crisis that the world has not seen, but there are two ways to look at it. One is to crib and cry that we are finished, everything is gone. The other is to say, of course there is a problem, but how does each one of us step up, take responsibility and play a role to help those around me, my family, my colleagues, my office, my company, and how do I take advantage of the unique opportunities being presented to all of us to build a new brave India where India, Indian economy, Indian business, and Indians genuinely are able to take the rightful place on the top table of the world. Thank you very much. Good luck and good wishes. And I'm happy to take on any comments or questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. It was fascinating hearing it, and it was like drinking off a fire hose, which was blasting in full flow. And I was struggling to make notes, and it's a confession. This pages are filled up, and I'm still seeing so many questions pouring in.
I can tell you there's one thing you can do. I wrote a book last year on our family and our family's business. It's called The Making of Hero. Many of the stories of our companies, how it got set up, how it's operated, are actually in there. We were actually doing a series of events when the COVID thing hit, and of course everything came to a stop. But it's available on all the networks and all the stores and Amazon, etc. So anybody's interested, more than welcome to get.
I'm sure for all the entrepreneurs, I think Hero is something which we all look up to, and I'm sure the stories will be fascinating as the last half an hour was. Mr. Munjal, I've got plenty of questions coming in, but I'd just like to connect a few dots before reaching out. And one of the first things which you said was crisis brings an opportunity.
Yep.
And I couldn't agree more in terms of just gratitude for the surroundings which has enabled us to go through these times.
Yes.
The one which you mentioned of thank you to the doctors, retailers, policemen, and in your words, new heroes emerge. I think fantastic and I think no better way than to thank even the maids, the drivers who made it happen.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think that goes all out to them. So if I have to connect the first question which comes from Mr. Barua, he's trying, and I'm just trying to put in what you said in terms of self-reliance, opportunities which India creates, the 1+1 strategy which you mentioned. He asks Mr. Barua that there's Atmanirbhar Bharat of 2020, which our Prime Minister is driving hard. And there has been a self-reliant India of the 1960s, the later times. So how structurally different are these two? What has changed?
That's a
Or
very,
what is,
very interesting question. In the 60s, India wanted to become uh, self-reliant by putting up walls. Please remember that's when we put up massive import duty walls, restrictions on economic activity. So the government decided at that time, the government would tell you what to do. Every economic activity, every business that you set up was licensed activity. So you had to go to a government to apply for a license, and they would tell you what to make, how much to make, and even where to make it. Now we are saying India has the opportunity because India has demonstrated capability, has the brains, has the wherewithal, and has the resources to put up and create more economic activity, which is world class and viable and competitive at the world scale and world size. And that is important, by the way. We are not saying shut down India right now. The Prime Minister's words, because this is a question that I myself also asked, and I hope it is not going back. And the very satisfactory response was, we want to stand up and be counted. We want to compete on an even keel. Until then, we have to create a balance. So which is why on some of goods coming in, we've actually put an import duty. But we're saying India should do as much as it can competitively. Whatever you can't do, of course, you will still import, by the way. But you want to be part of the global value chain. That's a critical one.
wonderful. I'll take this a little extension forward, and this is about the new era, which you said, how new eras and redefine and change the game. And I perhaps take you to the times maybe when in 2011, when Hero Honda became Hero Motocorp, and then you all created the new logo, the face of India, youthfulness, energy, the can-do spirit. uh, Indian catapult, the logo. So,
Yep.
tell us a bit about that phase and how did you all make the transition? It must have been tremendously challenging for you all.
It was. It was actually a very exciting phase because please remember that in 1984, when this plant was actually, the partnership was actually set up, we were a very small company. Our main business was bicycles. While we were the largest bicycle company in the world, but it was a small business compared to what global scale size businesses are. And Honda was even then a giant. It was a global leader even at that time. In the first 15 years, we learned a lot from them. I would say first 10 to 12 years, we learned a lot from them. In the last 15 or odd years of the partnership, I think they learned a lot from our setup as well and took it back into their system, which was fine because that was the way partnerships work. The new model design used to come from Japan, but based on requirements which was given by Hero Honda from India. It used to be designed here. And this company in India, as you know, was mostly being run by our teams, people allocated by us. We did, of course, have Japanese, two of the Japanese directors living here and some other Japanese, which was always, and that's why it was a good partnership. In some sense, the partnership had run out its full cycle because Honda also had another plant, another company on which they owned the company 100%, which was in the similar business. So most of us mutually decided that it's about time now for each of us to build our own independent destiny. So we did a lot of work internally. If you remember in those days, many analysts were saying, how can Hero even survive without Honda's name, brand, technology, products, and all of that? And so we did a lot of work internally of preparing for that. So it was not just the brand. The brand was actually the visible signage of the work that had been done inside. So we had set up partnership for design and technology in many parts of the world, in Austria, in UK, in Japan, and also outside of Jaipur. The company set up probably one of the largest and the most modern two-wheeler R&Ds that has been done anywhere in the world. So one thing we said was anything the company does should be as good as anywhere in the world. In the category that we are in, we must continue to be leaders. And we did a lot of work on branding, on marketing, on distribution. Again, the dealers many of them had come from being Hero Cycles dealers. They became two-wheeler dealers, but many were new. The relationship was built on a personal basis by my father, by my brothers, and some of the others, of course. And we had a wonderful professional team that runs that company. So that relationship, the deep bond, and what the company did in providing the support to dealers and the market on the product, pre-product, and the post-product sales. I think all of that made a big difference. Even the transformation of the brand was done on one night, on the 15th of August, when people woke up one day. 14th of August, all of the brands were Hero, Honda everywhere. On 15th August morning, it was like freedom. So it was also a little bit symbolic. All the boards, all the hoardings, all the letterheads, everything was changed overnight. And of course, the company that year got many awards for being the fastest brand change, the most effective brand change, and a whole host of others. So it was a very challenging, but an amazing learning experience.
So just I can really imagine in terms of setting up the distribution and holding back the channel would have been a tremendous challenge, especially when you have such stiff competition around.
Yes.
And that leads me to the next question, which comes from Chandramohan Agarwal. And he says that he's into distribution and trading of different products which require field visit for sales calls and installations. Also physical delivery of appliances, etc. He's perhaps in the service industry. His total activity has come to a standstill.
Mm-hmm.
To come back to a full-fledged business will take a long time. What do you suggest to such business people? That's his question to you.
So I think I spoke about this. These are specifically the businesses which have to focus on those three activities I mentioned. At this moment, try and conserve cash wherever you can. Figure out how you can be more efficient. By the way, delivery is taking place. It's not stopped. I know for a fact because we got something just the other day. People are delivering, people are coming to install. You have to do it in a safe, considerate manner. That is an essential requirement, but it's not stopped. There was a period when it had stopped, and now is an opportunity for the innovative ones to go out and demonstrate how, despite the situation, not because of the situation, but despite the situation, they will actually continue to grow. So as the situation continues to improve, the opportunity for these companies is actually tremendous after that. But there is a problem, as I said right now. I don't want us to not acknowledge or not accept it. But this is what is driving the innovation itself.
The next question comes in from Bibu Nag. And just to Bibu, Mr. Munjal did touch upon the fact that Invest India, there's a huge opportunity. India is making a pitch. Mr. Munjal did mention about three things, about the need for cash preservation, efficient operations, and also transforming technology in manufacturing. This question comes to you, Mr. Munjal, is don't you think India needs to heavily invest in research and development to create world-class products? Obviously, the answer seems to be a yes, but would you like to take this beyond what it means to create a new India, and how do the small entrepreneurs make it happen when they don't have enough cash to do it? Yeah.
So there are 2 or 3 aspects to this, and which is why I talked about what family businesses can do. So it's well known that India has invested much less in R&D than most other countries that we compete with. One important thing is communication. I should have talked about that also as an initiative in these difficult times. We have to communicate very openly, very fairly with all the people connected to our businesses, all of them, for them to realize and see why you are taking certain decisions in a certain way. There are companies who've shut down divisions. There are companies who've fired people. There are companies who've reduced salaries. Companies have deferred bonus payments. But if you explain to people, of course they understand that you would rather reduce salary rather than completely shut down an operation. It's exactly the same for R&D. I think we have never communicated enough in this country about the need and the benefits of research and innovation. Innovation has to be the new way. That has to be one of the biggest drivers of change in India post this current crisis. So that the investment is a longer haul for return is very clear. So we have always in India, and I'm not saying this for everybody, but majority of India industry has had a short-term view on investments. So if you want to invest something, you want to see a return in 6 months or a year. Now, R&D is such that sometimes you can invest for years and not see any return. But when you do, it's a massive windfall. But if you're continuously doing it, then the business constantly gains from it. That is why it has to become second nature to Indian business. And can be of any type. It can be process innovation, it can be product innovation, it can be design innovation, it can be service innovation. And all of them require India to focus on R&D. So one is what you call translational research, but you also need basic research of the kind that Indian Institute of Science does. We have very few doing basic research in India. We need to figure out a way to balance both. We set up a new university a few years ago in my father's name, just outside Delhi. And we said, in this university, research will start one day before classes will start, only to give a signal that it's important. Now, it doesn't really matter. Normally, most universities also do research, but they start 5, 10, or 20 years after the university is functional. But we also said that 70% of the research or thereabout in the first 10 years should be applied research. Research which can directly go and demonstrate itself in improved products, design, manufacturing, companies, civil society, wherever the benefit it might be able to give, even in governance. And while we are a new university, we have been given projects by the government to do for them. We're doing a project on effectivity of education. We're doing a project on how India actually can get more gold medals in the Olympics. It is a much more complex exercise than any of us can even imagine. It's not just simply saying our players should play better. Okay, but that's of course blindingly clear. But how do you get them to do that? So we're actually going into very great detail, and we hope, and we only call our projects complete when you can demonstrate a working model of the project. So we have many, many other research projects going on in our university, and of course in our companies. We have been doing it for a while. And I think for India, it ought to become a very high priority.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. And just to add, Bibu, I still remember somewhere in 2011, Mr. Munjal, you had bought out the range of bikes which changed the game. I remember it as the 250 bike, R&T, Leap, Dash, many of the first time, which kind of changed the experience. And also many of the companies actually invest in the equivalent of a box 3, wherein you spend a lot of money and you don't expect revenues now, and the box 1 engine keeps your cash flows going, and box 2 all about R&D.
You're right. That's a new rebalancing. That's a rebalancing that Indian business has to understand it needs to do. It's absolutely essential for us.
That's right. Mr. Munjal. There's a very interesting question which comes from Subhabrata Samak, and he says this, and it is a little dichotomy to the point which you had made, Mr. Munjal. You said that the family businesses is all about nimbleness, and you take a decision not for a generation, but perhaps for more than a generation. So you live to see your dream. And here the question which is saying, it's a little different. He's saying that he's observed the family businesses in India exist maximum for the third generation only. Why most family businesses in India fail after second or third? Maybe that's a question which you'd had with something in mind. There are also a parallel question which comes in with saying, how do you retain young members of the business families in the family business? I heard a good number of them are not interested to join the business. That is from Manindranath. So you could address both these questions, Mr. Munjal.
Sure. So his observation is absolutely right. But I should tell you, it's not true for India. It's true for the world. 94% of businesses worldwide, family-owned businesses, will destroy themselves. It's only about 6% which carry on generation after generation after generation, because they've learned the magic sauce of what makes it tick. And the simple answer, I can go into great detail on this, because there's lots and lots of study now that has been done worldwide on family-owned business. This has also become a subject for teaching in now many universities. Many business consultants now specialize in this as well. So the biggest distinction is the ability to understand that ownership and management are two different things. You cannot assume automatically, if I have a certain family name, that I will automatically become the head of this company or this business. Because if you own the business, the most important thing you need to understand is your value and wealth lies in the business. Therefore, you should take decisions and do what is best for the business. And if what is best for the business is not for your son or your nephew or your daughter to be running it, that's what you should do. And if it's not even best for you to be running it, that's what you should do. There are other roles to be played in a family-owned business. There's a role of philanthropy. There's a role of societal information. There's an owner's role. The other problem is that in most family-owned businesses, we end up training children to be good managers, very rarely to be good owners. And these are actually distinct things. They may not be very obvious, but there are two different things. And this is it's being developed like almost like a science now, while the way to do it is a combination of art and science. And if youngsters in a family-owned businesses are not interested in that business, it's absolutely okay to encourage them to do other things. So what we used to do in our family, before we restructured the family business, I was in charge of many of the young children's education induction into business and their placement into different roles. And I always used to tell them, I used to actually encourage them, if you're passionate about something, please go and do that. So we have one member of the family who became a chocolatier, one became a fashion designer, one got into civil society, one is running a university, and we are absolutely okay with that. Because if you can live your passion, if you can live your dream, what is better than that in life? Because then you will apply yourself much more. So even while looking at new opportunities, we very often encourage the youngsters to find an opportunity of business which they personally are very keen on, so that when he or she gets involved and you decide to fund that business, and that they would definitely do better at that business than at other businesses. So there's nothing wrong with that. I feel we have to be careful not to vicariously live through our children and not to expect our desires and wants to be theirs as well. Because these are very, very, and you want to encourage your children to be independent minded. You want them to have more knowledge than you. You want them to be more exposed than you. That is the way of the world.
I think this advice was worth its weight in gold. And if you can chase a passion, and if a passion turns out to be a business, then wow, what else can one want for? And to all the people in the corporate world and entrepreneurs here, please chase a passion beyond work. It'll pay you back multiple times. And it really echoes with what you say, Mr. Munjal. Perhaps we are running out of time, and I'll just take one last question, if it is okay with you, Mr. Munjal. One last question, and then we'll take it. So you did mention about two things, how India is transforming, and one was leading to cash preservation and efficient operations. That is directionally which is happening. You also mentioned about how there's a transformation happening in manufacturing and how industrialization happening in the rural sector or can happen. But what is key is what is a link that will keep the family businesses running in these times, in today's VUCA times. This question comes from Rajiv Datta. Cash preservation is also the need of the hour. You don't have the cash to spend. You were really struggling to cash to spend, and you still are struggling to grow. What is the link that will keep the family businesses together? For the corporates, it seems to be clear. Cash preservation, efficient operations, more technology, digitalization. But what about the entrepreneurs who don't have this access to them?
So I think there are two or three things which are critical. One is communication. Very, very important. Talk to the members of the family over and over and over again. Explain the situation. Explain the options and opportunities available, and take their views into taking the path which is best suited under the current circumstances. Second is you have to demonstrate, you have to walk the talk. If you're going to reduce salaries, you have to reduce your own salaries as well. You have to take a lesser dividend. So these have to be activities which go hand in hand to demonstrate that it's not just what you say, it's what you do that actually counts in the long run. And what you do is seen by members of the company who are non-family. Equally important is seen by the members of the family for them to manage their own behavior so that the family can stay together and find ways to preserve the business in a manner that you can actually grow it with the right innovation as soon as you get the opportunity. Because otherwise, as I said, many businesses actually will get destroyed. So we will see a negative fallout as well, by the way. I don't want us to fool ourselves into imagining that everything is rosy already and right away. There will be a big challenge at this moment, and it will be a while before all those who who lose their jobs actually get back on the rolls. So there is an opportunity here for us to say, let us be sensible, let us hold on to the good assets that we have, both in the family and in the business. And I think a common understanding in a group of family owners is very, very critical at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. As we come to the end of this conversation, any last message which you have for the Calcutta Management Association as the entire listeners in? Any last final parting thoughts?
So just that there is a term that's used very often in Bombay that I like. Things will happen, okay? There are things which will happen to us all the time. Environment, technology, economy, relationships. That how you respond to them defines you as a human being. The term that I like, which is used in Bombay, is bindas rehna chahiye. So have a balanced mind. Learn to take things lightly. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's, we are all very good at adapting things, but we're not very good at changing. So it's sensible. If you cannot change, learn to bend a little bit. As they say, a bend in a road is not the end of the road, unless you refuse to bend yourself, because you will have a crash then. So good luck to all the members of the Calcutta Management Association. You are one of the oldest and the more active association in the country. I know that for a fact. And I have had occasion to meet many of you over the years. So my compliment and good wishes for the wonderful work that's going on, and hope that you will continue and provide to your members and to society the right kind of ideas of what one must do at this kind of a time, and also what one must not do. I do have one message that I want to give. There is too much misinformation going around right now about the disease that is out there, the pandemic, and how to respond to it. Please take the responsibility of getting the right message out. There are only a few things that you need to do, not anything else. Please try and get that message out.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. On that note, for everyone, stay bindas. Don't take life too seriously. You'll never get out of it alive. Chase your passion, and like the Hero MotoCorp logo, a leap of faith is all we need. The next turning is not too far away. Thank you, Mr. Munjal. It was an exciting session being with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you,
Mr. Munjal. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we look forward to your support in the future as well. We'll be in touch. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye. Bye.
Shenoy, I think it was a fantastic program.
We'll connect.
Yeah.